Hello. Hey, this video, what we're gonna do is a kind of a complete walkthrough of like a typical process in Lightroom. And we're gonna take this image here and we'll transform it into this one. So what I wanna do here is kind of a typical workflow from, importing images, organizing them, doing some color correction, doing some color grading and editing, and then exporting them, because I wanna do that all quickly now. So you get an idea of like, this is what Lightroom does and all its different parts. And because I don't want you to get in later in the course, and go, that's how it all goes together. I wanna do that in this video, okay? The trouble is I'm gonna do it quite quickly and not go into too much detail. I'm just gonna show you how I do stuff, okay? We're gonna do it together, okay? So we're gonna do something together. Yeah, the rest of this course is going to break out all these different things like color correction, organization, color grading. I'm not sure what I'm doing with my hands, exporting in more detail. But for now, I just want to give you a quick little run through, get excited, see how it all works, and then we'll work through kind of more step by step with the course. All right, so let's jump into the computer and Lightroom. All right, so first up, open up Adobe Lightroom, and there's gonna be lots of like welcoming and tutorials and stuff. So skip all of that, because that's my job. You might have used Lightroom before. Regardless, what we need to do is get to this little panel here. So you can open and close it if it's not already open here. It's called the Photos tab, and we're gonna go to Add Photos. Okay, we're gonna go to Browse, okay, Browse. And what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna say, I would like to find the exercise files that I've downloaded, okay? And let's go to 01 Datsun, open that up, and I'm gonna select all of these. So I can drag across them all, you can shift click them all, select all of the images in this folder here and go Review for import. One thing to note when you are bringing something in, just make sure at the moment, we're gonna create a new album. Okay, and we're going to call it Datsun. So we're just going to group them up together. If you've already got lots of stuff in Lightroom, we're going to talk about obviously albums later on in the course, but just a way of grouping our images. Call it Datsun. Let's click Create. Let's go to Add these 6 photos. And down here, there's our album. Let's click on the Datsun album. All right, this is my little weekend car, little Nissan or Datsun Bluebird. I've had it off the road for a little while, got it back on the road yesterday. I was like, you know what? I'll take photos of it in a car park. And it'll be the subject matter for this video. So depending on your Lightroom and your screen size, down here you can drag up the sizes bigger or smaller. Can you see this little slider? Just makes our thumbnails bigger. Drag it up. Okay, I'm on this first option here. Okay, be on this view if you want to. Okay, just so I can see them all. And what we're gonna do is just a real basic like or disliking of the images. Okay, so this one here, with it selected, you can see this little white box goes around it. So I'm gonna say, you are, do I like you? Are you a 4-star? Are you, like that one there I don't really like, 3 stars. This one here, I do like the depth of field, 5 stars even. These two here, don't like the composition of this one, but I like this kind of part of the, maybe we can crop into this one. This one here, I do like 5 stars. Any that I haven't numbered? 4. This one here, 4. Okay, so you can do some basic grading at the beginning just by selecting on them and choosing your stars down the bottom here. Very exciting. All right, so you do the same, go through and grade the ones that you like, you don't like, or at least the ones you like the most, even if you don't like any of them. Then what we can do is, imagine this is like 1,000 photographs or 100 photographs, not just. I've just kept the file size small here, we just got 6. Okay, and up here under the filters, we can say, actually, show me the ones that are 5-starred, okay? And we can start working on just these ones potentially. You might just grab both of these and say, actually, let's just export these as a JPEG. We can send them to the client and go, hey, what do you think of these ones? Before you start doing your editing. Okay, what I'm gonna do is up here, I'm gonna clear the filtering. Okay, click on, that actually just closes it. You can say, I don't want the ones that are 5-star or above. Okay, so come out of there. Make sure you're still under your albums and under Datsun. Okay, and the one we're gonna edit in this one is this. Okay, even though this one got a 4-star. I've already written my notes, okay, and it's all around this one. So to get into this one and start editing it, you can either just double click it or switch from this grid mode, okay, over to the detail mode. Okay, detail, what do they call that one? Photo grid. Okay, so let's just double click it. It gets really big. You can see down the bottom here, here's the rest of them. Okay, and you can still work through them. Okay, but we're gonna work on this first image here. So have that one open. Now what we're gonna do is kind of 2 parts of the editing. First of all, we do correction. So it's going to fix it because it's really, you know, it's underexposed at the moment, and you know that it's hard. The sky nor the car are in a good space, but we can fix that. That's why we're here in Lightroom. Once we get it kind of, you know, fixed, looking natural, then we'll go through and add the color grading and the effects afterwards, which is not always what you're going to do. Maybe just fixing them, but we'll go through the whole process here. So I'm going to go through a really common process. I'll leave out any of the really difficult stuff because we'll do that later in the course, but let's go through a nice easy edit. Okay, and what you want to do, this is your editing options here. Click on this one. And the cool thing about Lightroom is that they've organized them basically in an order of what you should probably do first. So when you're new, start with light, work with color, work with effects, and then get into these other ones later on if you need to. Often you don't have to get into these last ones, which is really cool. They've put them in a consistent order. The other nice thing is under light, they've put in the most important all the way through to the least important at the bottom. And actually least important is not the right terminology. It's more to do with like which you do first and which do you do last. Which are the big tweaks and which are the little ones. And the first big tweak is not even a tweak. What I like to do is grab the exposure and just move it down and up. What you will find is there's going to be lots of pop-ups everywhere trying to get you to do stuff. You're going to have to try and skip that if you are new to Lightroom. Back to this, okay? A lot of closing pop-ups. But for the moment, like the first thing I do on any image, okay, is just drag this all the way down and all the way up. What I'm looking for here is I'm not trying to correct it. I'm just looking to see what information is here. Watch this. So this is it in the middle, okay? If I drag it all the way up, can you start to see like in the middle? Check out like the information above this wheel here. It's gone. There's nothing in there. It's all black, except when I drag the exposure up, look at that. There's plenty of information in there. I don't want it because it's an ugly old power box for the for the aerial. Okay, I don't want to see that, but that information is there. I can see through the grill here to the radiator fans. There's all sorts of information that particularly I don't want. But there will be some images where you're like, oh, look at all that stuff in there. It's awesome. I'm gonna get that out. Okay, and same with coming down here. Let's have a look. Can you see all this really cool detail, all the LEDs? Okay, in the headlights? Look at these tiny little LEDs in here. With it back up here, it looks like kind of one big smush. I'm gonna click once to zoom in. We're going to do our first shortcut, which is Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and hit plus. Let go, and you should get your little hand here that you can click and drag around. If you don't get it, tap spacebar. Spacebar kind of toggles between the two. And can you see in here, I've zoomed in enough that they all look like they're blurred together, but if I do the exposure right down, look, they start all this individual information in there. Look at that good stuff. Ah, Bluebird. That gives me a kind of a good indication of like what information is available before I start correcting or fixing or editing. What we're gonna do is go back to fit. See down the bottom here, let's click fit. And that was it. That's all I do. Give it a shake to see what's in there. Okay, because sometimes look at the clouds. There's loads of cool stuff in there. Okay, but here, it all looks like it's all overexposed. So that's my first step. The next little shortcut I'm going to show you is double clicking these little guys here. If you wanted to get back to zero instead of doing this, oh, come on, get zero, too far. Just double click them and they go back to where they started. So the first thing I do now is one of two things. I fix the exposure, or under color, I fix the temperature and tint, depending on what's called the white balance, depending on which is worse, okay? The white balance is not bad in here. So the camera shot it okay. It's not too, like here, it's not too blue and it's not too orange. Okay, so remember, double click it to get it back to where it was. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. So it's either that, because sometimes it's really way out and there's no point fixing, like going through and fixing all these finer details when this thing is like completely like shot at the wrong white balance or something just weird happened. Okay, so I fix, either temperature and tint first to get the white balance right, or I fix the exposure, depending on what's worse. And in this case, it's the exposure. Okay, the car is really dark and the sky is, not good either. So we're gonna work in light. What I like to do, and what you'll see in this course is I'll close these up. You can have them all open. It just gets a bit scary. Like, so much information. Okay, so what I like to do is just close them up. Okay, and I do it when I'm working professionally as well. Like, it's not like, I like to keep them closed. Okay, so we're gonna start with light. And the cool thing about it is you just work your way through all of these. And if you hover above the names, it'll tell you what they do. But basically, don't worry too much about the definition. Okay, if you're a photographer, you probably know exposure, contrast, and a few of these. I'll explain them more in the course. But when you're editing, what you're doing is you're holding on this one, and not so much looking at, how much exposure am I going to go over? Okay, all right, we're going to go up 1 or 1.2. what we're doing is just dragging and looking at the image, not caring where it ends up. And what I find is, especially when somebody's new, they're like, just dragging it and they're looking, they're dragging and looking. What you want to do is don't be afraid to give it a good old jiggle around. And what I do is I'll jiggle it quite big. I'm moving my mouse back. I'm looking at my image. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to find where I feel like the middle ground is for this thing. And another good tip is don't worry about trying to fix everything. Okay. I've picked an image where we can kind of fix everything, the sky and the car in one shot. Okay. Just to make this introduction easier. But later in the course, what I'll do is, there'll be a really oversaturated sky or, overexposed sky and underexposed, focus subject. There'll be night shots where we've got to break those up. But for the moment, what you want to do is just identify the most important thing. It might be the foreground of a landscape image. It might be the object or the model. In our case, it's the car here. So don't worry about the sky. Don't be trying to fix that at the same time. That can be fixed separately. And what I'm doing here is, again, not trying to fix it all, just trying to get some sort of happy medium of where I want it to be. And you're like, well, how do I know if it's better or worse? Okay, you can use the long way. See this button down here? Before, after. Before, after. Just give it a click. Okay, and what you'll find is a really handy shortcut. If you've printed out your shortcut sheets, you'll see it there at the top. Okay, there is the backslash key. Your backslash key, if I hover above it, this one here, can you see it says show original? Okay, so if you are looking for the shortcuts for something you do all the time, can you see? There's a forward slash and a backslash. Okay, make sure you're using the backslash. You see the back one leans back. You got it. Okay, so before, after. You're gonna be hitting that button all the time. So start with exposure, then just work your way through. Again, with contrast. Now, contrast is an interesting one. Basically, there is a basic rule. It could be just my rule, is move it up a little bit. 10, 20, it just looks nicer. In my opinion, everything needs a little bit of contrast, especially if you're shooting raw images over JPEG. If you're not sure what that is, we'll cover that later in the course as well, but often contrast, just drag it up a little bit. Everything looks better with a bit more contrast. Again, use our backslash. Highlights, okay? Again, we'll explain these a bit more detail, but just work back. Highlights is kind of the, not quite white, but close to white, you're adjusting those. Okay, so a lot of the clouds, a lot of the sparkles in here, that's what we're gonna be doing. So dragging it along, yeah. There's not much to do in this particular image. I wanna get a bit of the sky back, but I know later on there's gonna be a better way to get it. So I'm gonna kind of just get it. Remember, forgetting about the sky, just looking at the car, because we can get the sky separately. There's not a lot to do here. Okay, and I had no idea where it was. I was just dragging it back and forth, and I left it at -24. You might leave it at 0. Okay, shadows, let's go. Quite a lot of work to do in here. What do I want to do? I want this kind of compromise of seeing some of the details of the wheels without seeing my dirty inner, wheel wells. Okay, so funny, I left it at -5. It might as well be 0, okay, because I haven't done a whole lot. So I'm going, yeah. There, where did I end up? -9. Cool, that's consistent. Whites, okay. Again, I'm not trying to fix the clouds. I'm trying to fix the car and moving the whites. The whites are kind of like pure parts. Highlights are kind of everything that's in the lightish space. Whites are the pure whites. Okay, let's just go you. I like this contrast that appears in here against the useless wing mirror. Okay, there we go. Let's look at the blacks. There's quite a bit of work to do down here in the foreground. Well, it can control a lot of it. Remember, we're not worrying about the ground so much, we're worrying about the subject, the car. And I feel like there's making the absolute blacks a bit blacker is what I want to do. Backslash on, backslash off, backslash on, off, on, off, on, off. Better? Worse? Now I'm going to be honest, I always over edit my images. Subtlety is not something I'm good at. I like to bam, look, I'm here. I've done something awesome. Ask me who edited this. Okay, whereas there'll be a lot of you out there who'll be like wanting to capture it great in camera and just doing subtle tweaks. And that's something to know about me. If I say always drag up contrast, you might decide that you do not always drag up contrast. You might be dragging it down. Dan is an over editor. All right, the next one that I do a little bit of work in for correction is color. Okay, and this will depend on your image. Ours is not too bad. Okay, under color, the white balance here, and depending on your image, mine doesn't need a lot of work. It seems to be okay. Drag these left and right. Like, do I want it to be warmer or cooler? Okay, double click it to reset it. Does it need to be more green or more magenta? I don't like either of those, so I'm just going to double click it and leave it. But that's something you might have to do. The other thing is part of my process is vibrance. Vibrance just bumps up the color a little bit, like too far, okay? And I always move it up a little bit. Remember, Dan the over editor though. So just a little bit of vibrance. I don't touch saturation. What I do touch is this thing here, color mixer. So this is where you can go through and say, actually, the reds in this image, I want them to be more saturated or less saturated. Okay, and you can just pick a couple of colors, okay, especially if it's landscape, it might be the greens, yellows. In my case, the focal, the focal point is this red color. So I'm going to grab the reds and say just be a bit more saturated, and the luminance might be up or down a bit, depending on what we want to do. Here we go, backslash on, backslash off. What you can do is backslash turns every bit of editing on and every bit of editing off. What you can do is see these little eyeballs. Okay, you can say just the color on. You hold it down, click and hold. That's the color changes that I made. So subtle. You might not think so. Okay, and you can work on the light, just the color, just the light changes, leaving the color alone. So just a way of individually turning these little adjustment bits off. So what I'd like to do is probably the greens. I don't want them in this image. I just want to pull them back. It's not part of the focus of this image. They can stay there, but the greens can be lower the saturation. And often that's it for kind of correcting images, getting it as good as it can be. Backslash on, backslash off, or remember you can toggle it down here. Okay. Fixing images, that is color correction, and that's kind of the most of the work that I do. Grab exposure, check what you've got, okay, see what's in there, okay, what's actually available to dig out and have a look at, okay, and then just work your way through. Contrast up a little bit, okay, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks are all very individual for the image and your tastes, but just work your way through those. And then under color, make sure your temperature and tint are something that you like, vibrance up a little bit, and potentially for some little tweaks, go into the color mixer, pick the colors that you want to adjust and either change the hue of them, the saturation or the luminance, and get it to a point where you're happy. Now we haven't added any like really specific, grading or effects like you saw at the beginning there. We'll do that next, but sometimes you're doing this to this sort of point. And what the next step for this, which will be later in the course, will be masking out the sky and working on that separately. But that's a bit advanced for this earlier in the course. We're just doing a quick run through here. But color correction is boring. Let's do color grading. And that's where this effects panel and a bit of color comes in. Now, in terms of order, these aren't particularly in any order. Maybe it's just me. Like the first thing I do for anything, video, photographs, vignette, drag it to the left. Job done. Generations of photographers spent time trying to remove vignette from lenses, and the first thing I do is go and do it because I feel like it draws the eye to the center. Drag it to the right, it becomes white. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. You might love it, but a vignette, and again, I overuse vignettes, okay? Just do all the time. Okay, so remember you can turn the eyeball off on effects, on, just click and hold it down, okay, and decide whether you're into it or not. I love a good vignette. And then the next one is dehaze. Dehaze comes with great responsibility. This is like lens flare for Photoshop. You shouldn't add it to every single image, but you're gonna because it's so awesome. Watch this, dehaze left or right. It's meant to be used for skies or for like mist or haze. That's what it's called, dehaze, but it just looks good for everything. We're gonna drag it up, okay? It's obviously crazy, but look how cool it makes things look. You might be shaking your head, okay, but just a little bit of dehaze. Look at this. Oh, on, off, on, off. Oh, especially in the sky. Watch this. I'll turn it all the way up just to see the sky. Look what it's done here in the sky. Dehaze the sky. Look what it was before. Look what it is now. So much cool stuff in there. Okay, so obviously too far. What I have to do with myself is go, oh, that looks really cool. And when I'm really happy with it, go back a little bit. Okay, so dehaze is a lovely way of kind of exaggerating some of the effects in here. We'll go to it in better detail later on. Ooh, I want to go through so much more here in this video, but we're kind of just leaping into the course, not explaining too much. So we've done enough. We've done color correction, so kind of got it to a nice point, then dumped into the effects, and I want to jump into it all and just start editing this forever. Okay, but I feel like it's a good enough point. We've added some effects to it. Actually, one last thing I want to do, can't stand the blue in the sky, so I'm going to my color mixer, blues. Don't be so saturated. Not all the way down, but just something more believable than that crazy thing that the dehaze did. Okay, one last thing, I can't help myself. color, color grading, shadows towards the teal, highlights towards the orange, before, after. Before, after. I love that effect. Anyway, we'll cover it properly in the course amongst a load of different options and styles. What I want to show you now is the real power of Lightroom, because we've done this correction and grading. And what we can do down here in my film strip now, I can click on this one, okay, and I can go to edit and go to copy. I can go back to my film strip. See down here, the little icon, and say actually let's open up this one and go edit, paste. Get ready. Mind blown. Automatic vignetting. Okay, and all the corrections from that last image came along. So often, photo shoots are all done at the same place, same lens, similar lighting conditions. You can go through and just dump them onto all of them once you're happy with them, or at least your client's happy with them. I'm going to go back to the grid here. Remember, I've got mine quite big so you can see them all. Okay, so I can select on this, hold shift, click on this last one to select them all. And you're like, he's gonna, yes he is. Look at this. Paste all of them, watch them all change. Look at that tealy orange goodness. That is Lightroom superpower. Double click on it to get into the detail view. Backslash on, off. Oh, very exciting. Then you go back to here and you say all of you, okay, went back to my grid, select all of them and say, give me a large JPEG to send out. Man, I love Lightroom and that tiny little car. But for now, it's class project time. Let's get you set up for that in the next video. All right, that is the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. It helps me out. Also subscribe to the channel because there's lots more Lightroom content where that came from. If you are sitting there thinking though, I wish you'd just do a course, take me from zero to hero all the way through Lightroom and show me everything. Oh, you're in luck. I've got something called the Lightroom Essentials course. There'll be a link to it in the description here. So check that out if you want to go from zero to hero in Lightroom. But for now, carry on. Like and subscribe.